We're gathered here today, Simon Michaux, Ivor Loffing, John Peach, Dean Woburn, and we will be discussing peak oil and related matters. And I've got a presentation here. So this is the evidence we often talk about. And Rystad Energy. Can you guys see the presentation?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So this is Rystad Energy has some of the best data, which breaks down the 1P, which is the proven, probable, and the speculative. And so the summary is 1P 90% recoverable, 2P is 50% recoverable, and 2PCX is, well, we're not sure, but basically there's 8.5 years remaining of the 1P and 8.4 from the probable. And there has been a decline from 2022 by 13 billion barrels in the proven and 43 billion barrels in the probable. And now this is the conventional, the Hubert prediction. So he had predicted less in total, but otherwise it's on track, and Hallock has updated it. And this one's from John Peach. So we're right on track. And I know in Canada, often talk about Alberta oil, but it peaked in 1998. And it's not because they didn't do the wells, actually, because the wells continue to increase. You see, this was 1998, and they continue to make more wells. And then they peaked in 2009, but they weren't able to increase production beyond that. Now, U.S. shale is what's producing most of our stuff. And as you can see in 2018, after they fracked the well, it would go for many months here, 50 months. But now, after they frack a well, it only goes for 5 or 6 months, and so it is depleting. And now some people say, well, if the oil price goes up, then they'll be able to exploit those more difficult things. But actually, oil price depends on the money supply, and so right now with high interest rates, people don't have money to spend on oil, and so the price of oil is actually going down. And lots of people, they can't afford housing or food, that they're just sleeping in tents, and so they're not buying fuel. And we've got limits to growth. So 2015 or 2016 was the lowest food prices ever, and as you can see, the severe food insecurity has been rising steadily ever since. And the limits to growth back in the 70s predicted, well, basically what we're going through now. And as you can tell, we've kind of reached the peak just recently. And now, in terms of the future, there's some people like Art Berman believe that after our peak here with the NGLs in 2027, it'll just be a slow decline. Others, such as John Peach, foresee more of a Seneca cliff, where because of the power law distribution, where we have the large fields were discovered first, and then the small fields are discovered later, and so we may see more of a sharp decline. And we won't be able to transition to the green transition because we simply don't have the minerals. As you can see, if just for the copper alone, if we wanted a 28-day buffer, we would need 254 years of extraction. And so where are we now? We're in scarcity industrialization. And then most, like, EU is ahead of the curve. 55,000 companies closed in France alone. And most heavy industry has shut off, and medium industry is shutting down. And even in Canada, people are living in tents. And so the EROI basics, enough to pay for the arts was in like the 90s, enough to pay for healthcare was in the 2010s. And we don't know when we're going to reach these other limits, but it's believed that once our society goes below 7, we won't be able to deliver food or pay for farmers. And so that's when we will get into the real collapse scenario. And in terms of renewables, there is basically most renewables do not have enough energy return on investment to power that EROI. But we do have firewood here at 30. And then otherwise there's nuclear and hydro. But the coal and the natural gas here, these are actually lower now because coal is becoming scarce as well. Where are we headed? Salvage economy. Most energy is embedded energy, and so there's a few. So this would be kind of like what we would imagine in the future urban areas, just salvage crews taking out things that they can take to the rural areas. And then in the rural areas, you'd have the rustic Amish people. Like in South Ontario, that is considered the most likely. And then out in the boonies, you'd have the survivalist lifestyle. Now, they actually live longer than the Amish, just because it's less work. And then there's the New Age Sylvan, which is kind of a hybrid of the two. And they would have food forests. And so they can actually live longer than any of the other groups, just because it's easier life and happier. And so what can work? People homesteading, growing their own food. Church of 60 can support bovine transport. Village of 360 could have a biogas vehicle. A neighborhood of 5,000 market and a store. So this is an example of a family homestead. This is like one possible layout. And then there's a church. See, it's got a couple horses. And then with the village could have a biogas facility. And the neighborhood would have markets and stores. City could have thorium industrial manufacturing for those solar panels and things like that. And then the county would be in charge of railroads and communication networks. And so the recommended policies are Land Protection Act, to cap based on carrying capacity, opening up Crown land for homesteading, and allowing or encouraging sustainable living practices like rainwater collection, compost toilets, local building materials, and a 30 to 50 meter offset from the road to avoid roving bandits. All right. Any questions? Or say, did you like it? Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Great. Okay.
I like quick recap. A lot of us know what it all was, but like if you do it again, you want to do it slower for people to really pay attention. I mean, you have an hour or something, you could definitely make it into a nice hour talk to people. One thing I was thinking,
Go ahead.
Art Berman says that oil production is, gonna drop in the Permian. Meanwhile, same time, the price of oil is going down. So I think what we're going to end up with is this big whammy where we're not going to have the oil from the Permian, which is holding up the oil market, and the price is going to go down, so nobody's going to want to make any more. So I think in the next year or two, we're going to have some severe problems with it's really going to kind of bite the world economy in the butt.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I think what you have is really great, though.
Yeah. Well, I tried to do it in 10 minutes because there's a 10-minute limit, but then they can ask questions.
Oh, no, I think you could show this to people and make it a longer talk, maybe like an hour or something. And, just for regular people, really explain one. And I think you could have a really nice talk right there. People would love it.
So what I like about it, oh, sorry, there's a bit of a lag. I interrupt you. Sorry, mate.
It's all right. Go ahead.
So what I like about this is the average person can get their arms around it and they can actually have a go at doing it themselves without too much assistance from outside their own expertise, so they can take control of their lives.
Yeah, with land to grow their own food.
Well, that's the hard part. Once they get that part sorted, then the next hard part is learning what to do. But it's all on them.
Yeah. And I know, like, some of the things that people say, it's like, well, people don't want to do that. They just want all your food delivered to the city. But I'm saying that, we should make it available for those people that do want it, because they will at least they will survive. And then if they have it set up and going and they know what they're doing, then when the people in the city are like, well, I guess they really won't have any food at the store, then they might be like, okay, well, let's try the Amish or the indigenous or the food forest people.
So, fun fact, in World War One, when there were food shortages in Europe, in the cities, people had no choice but to travel out to the countryside and barter with farmers. And all they had to barter a lot of the time was jewelry. So they were handing over really expensive jewelry for that box of carrots.
Yeah, yeah.
So many farmers who actually, were lucky, came out of World War II relatively wealthy.
Mm. Yeah, the Great Depression was there as well, right? Also
Same principle. Same principle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I know in the Soviet Union it didn't work out so well, just because, well, it was more of a managed economy, and they weren't allowed to share.
So on one hand, it was a managed economy, so there was a very good audit of what was on the ground in terms of resources. On the other hand, anyone who took the time to innovate and do something new or to benefit themselves got a bullet in the head for their trouble.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. All right. Did someone else want to do a presentation now? I know John Peach had something in store.
Good on you, John.
Okay.
Okay. Here, do you know how to share screen?
Yeah, I did. Hang on.
Okay.
Let's see.
So yeah, I'm hoping that intro, basically with the county presentations, how I've seen them, is that you do your 10-minute presentation and it can be super fast, but then they might question you for an hour afterwards. Yeah, and then you can go back to the slides and things like that.
Can you see this now?
I see Facebook Peak World Chat January edition.
Hang on. Wrong.
You might need to share a different screen.
Where'd it go? Huh. Oh. How about that?
There. Okay, and now I see outline. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I got two questions from people, and going to try to answer them here. The first one was from Nils Peterson, and he wanted to know if it would be possible, just looking at energy, is it possible to divert enough energy from oil or fossil fuels into building renewables so that you kind of maintain the same total energy amount? And the second question, Roland Sicario found this paper from ASPO France, and it showed this modified Hubbard linearization. He wanted an explanation about how that works. So those are the two questions I'll try to answer here. So the first one, first thing we need to look at is the ROI of oil and renewables. And it's kind of interesting here because the ROI, of course, is energy return on input. And renewables have a very high initial energy input, but low maintenance costs. That is, once you put the solar panels up, there's not a whole lot of maintenance you have to do. So all of the input comes initially, or most of it comes initially. So what that means is, suppose you have an ROI of 15 for solar panels, and let's say you have a lifespan of 30 years, then what you're getting every year is that 15 total back spread out over 30 years, or a half a unit of energy per year, right? So in other words, the EROI says you put in 1 unit of energy input to construct the system, and then you get 15 back, but it's spread out over the 30-year lifespan, right? So it's a half per year. With oil or coal, gas, there is an initial cost for drilling the well, but then there's this sort of constant energy input as it goes from the well through refineries to distribution and so forth. And so it would seem like that's more energy intensive. It is as you go along, but what it means is that you're getting your 15 back almost right away, right? Because when you think about it, that everybody in the chain, the supply chain, wants to push it on to the next customer as fast as possible. So the oil suppliers, the drillers want to get it to the refinery as quickly as possible, and the refinery wants to get to wholesale as fast as possible, and so forth. So the amount of time that the oil spends from the point that it's taken out of the ground to the end user is very short. So you're putting that 1 unit of energy in, and let's say that this oil has also an EROI of 15. You're getting 15 back very quickly, right? So this is very important for all of this renewable energy, is that you don't get your energy back as nearly as fast for renewables as you do for for fossil fuels.
Mm-hmm. And if you have like a hailstorm or something, you might not get it back at all.
Oh yeah. I mean, this is assuming that everything runs perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so answering Noah's question, what happens is that what the first thing I did was I said, let's assume that there's a natural 5% decline in oil. So we're already post-peak and it's declining very rapidly. Can we still pull off a conversion? And it turns out that yes, if you just look at energy, nothing else, you can divert. It turns out that about 3.5% is this purple curve, and after 30 years, you break even. So this is combining all of the renewable energy that you've built over 30 years, along with this decline in fossil fuels over 30 years. And yeah, so you could come back to where you started. No matter what you do, you're going to have a decline initially, right? That you're going to take a hit, but in principle, you could break even over a 30-year period. Now, after the 30 years, you have to start all over again, because those initial panels that you built here are beyond their end of life, and so they're not producing anything. But what's happening here is that you build some in 1 year, you get that half a unit back. You build in the next year, you get another half unit, and so on. And it's cumulative, so that's why this works. You can break.
But this is without the battery backup, right?
Oh, this is nothing. This is just energy, right?
This is just energy without the battery, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It doesn't include the fact that we don't have enough minerals and metals to do this. Nothing else is included. It's purely energy. And in fact, that's the next thing is this is a very myopic view. It doesn't look at anything else. And so, trying to do this is probably impossible. And I think that, one of the big worries for me is that this biodiversity decline is just incredible.
That is really bad. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's horrible. And I don't see that anything that we would do, if we in any way tried to maintain the same level of energy that we've got now, what's the indication that we would actually suddenly start taking care of the natural world? I just don't see that happening. So, in a lot of ways, I think if we were forced to a reduced energy lifestyle, it might not be so bad. And then, these are all the Earth boundaries that we're exceeding, and energy is the huge one that they don't even include in this thing. At least 60 times our sort of human level of energy output. That is what our ancestors lived on with just their own power plus, some livestock. But now with fossil fuels, it's just massively overshooting. Okay, so if you want to read any more about this, I've written it all out in this post, The Decline and Fall of the Petroleum Empires. You can go take a look at that and get into the details. Second question was from Roland, was about this ASPO France Hubbert linearization. And so Hubbert, as you know, assumed that oil production would follow this bell curve. And if you take this bell curve, this is production versus time. If you take production divided by cumulative production and plot it against cumulative production, then if it's a bell curve, you get this nice straight line. And then you can just, extrapolate forward and say, okay, when it hits the 0 on the y-axis, that's your total that you'll ever get. Okay, so
ultimately memorable.
It's a really nice way to estimate the the upper limit of how much could be extracted. And in Hubbard's time, it was a great way to make this estimate because it doesn't require a lot of computing power to be able to do this. The problem is that it's not quite this nice bell curve. And so these guys at ASPO France put in some extra terms to try to straighten it out and make something out of it. My point all along has been that production is not a bell curve. And so you can see here, initially up to about 1970, it kind of looked like it was following the bell curve, but after that, it's definitely not bell curve-like. And when you do this linearization with this data, you get this, kind of wacky looking curve. There's no way you're going to call this a straight line. So the problem is that, the Hubbert linearization works if you have a bell-shaped curve. But if you don't, then you're making nonsense out of the data. You're trying to fit a linearization to something that shouldn't be linearized. So that's why I've been going to this logistic fit of cumulative data for discoveries, not production, but discoveries. And that's where you get this very good fit. And so with this and current computing capabilities, I can estimate the shape of this curve very well. And what that means is that, I can say, well, the end point for conventional is that, 1990, and for fracking it's about 250 gigabarrels, total 2240. And just to be clear, I've called...
How much have we extracted so far?
Almost all of it. Okay. I'm sorry, not extracted, but discovered.
Discovered. Discovered. Okay.
Right. So we're very close to the end of discoveries, and it's clear. I mean, the discoveries are trickling.
Yeah, they're declining.
Yeah, they're almost nothing at this point. And just to be clear, I've called the conventional era from 1900 to 2000, and the fracking era from 2000 to now. It's really, I think this is a monetary policy more than actual fracking versus conventional. I mean, obviously conventional discoveries have continued into the 2000s. But I think what's happened is that it was starting to tail off here around 2000, and then money supply, started kicking in, especially after 2008, and so that's what drove, sort of the newest discovery. Okay, so yeah, here's the answer to your question. This is where we are. It's 2204 versus about 2240 is what the model would say. So, we're 36 gigabarrels left of discovery.
Okay.
It'll probably be a little bit more than that, but it's really tailing off. And meanwhile, production today is 1641, remaining 563 gigabarrels. So here we are, clearly on the downside of what's left. And our midpoint of production was 2006, and the peak, if 2018 was the peak, that's clearly well beyond the midpoint. So it's not a symmetric production curve the way Hubbard would expect. So anyway, that's the picture of where I see that we are now. I just don't think that the ASPO France model should be taken with any sort of reality there that production does not fit a bell curve.
So this remaining 563, this is the 2P numbers? Or?
Yeah, right. So I always use 2P because 1P says that you are 90% sure that you're going to get it, right? So that you have to make your numbers very small. If you're going to be 90% sure, then you have to make your total production small to fit that 90%. The other end of the extreme is the 3P, which is only 10%. So that means that the numbers can be very large. And the 2P is the Goldilocks. It's 50-50. It's the right way to choose the data.
Okay. So I noticed you also have 36 billion barrels here per year, but I know Rystad was saying it's 30, so I don't know. There's a bit of a discrepancy there.
Yeah. So what does that give us? If theirs is right, then what is it? 356.
Yeah. And if I do 563 divided by 36, I get 15. And if I divide it by 30, I get 18.
Yeah, so I was being a little generous with a 20.
Okay, I see.
Yeah. All of this is dependent on how good do we really know the data, right? And we don't know the data either.
And so if it's only half of that, it would be closer to 8 years again, I guess. Well, 16 divided by 2 or 18 divided by 2, that would be 9.
Yeah.
Okay. Did anyone have any questions or comments on that? Simon? Oh, you're muted.
John, you do excellent work, mate.
Thanks.
I make a point of referencing you when I do stuff. But is there a way of actually getting the quality of the resource onto the chart? Because in mining, the quality of the minerals that we've been mining has been decreasing steadily for over a century. And it's only just now, there's two problems. Grade's going down, but also grind size is going down.
Right.
So the smaller the mineral grains are, the finer we have to grind it, and there's an exponential relationship between energy and size decreasing for grind size.
Right. Yeah.
So those two things together mean the quality of our reserves are falling off a cliff. And I think this happens with all natural resources, and oil will be the same.
Yes. That's a very good point, that it follows this exponential decline in quality. Everything does, right? And so the oil is kind of the same way. That the what we're running on now is the fracking oil, and it has a very high API rating. That's a measure of the viscosity, and in essence, the hydrocarbon chains are getting shorter as you start using this shale oil. And so that means that you can't refine as much diesel or jet fuel or bunker oil for shipping out of the shale oil as you could out of conventional oil. And since the economy really depends on those heavier oils, we're going to be running out there pretty quickly too. So I haven't done that kind of analysis, but it's out there that
no one's done it yet.
What's that?
No one's done it yet, and if you happen to be first, then you're the one that gets quoted.
Okay, then. There's an incentive. Yeah, well, and then the EIA has been kind of fiddling with the numbers too for quite a while. That U.S. oil from their data is including natural gas liquids and refinery gains, and I don't think other sources do that quite as much as the EIA does.
So I was talking to Gail Tefferberg. In 2019, I wrote an Outlook report on oil, and I looked at this for the first time. I was trying to follow you in your footsteps, John, and I was talking to Gail Tefferberg about in the data from BP Statistics and the EIA and the IEA and the OECD, is somewhere along the way they change classification to what they include in that data. Right. And so production's one thing, but in demand or in consumption, they include now biofuels and gains, refinery gains and natural gas liquid refinery steps and all that. And so when you try and overlay the two, you can't reconcile them. And they've done this on purpose, the bastards. So it's really hard to actually untangle this.
Yeah.
And so I was shocked at the time, but not shocked anymore, to learn that the IEA was a private organization. Right?
Yeah.
So they're not a government-backed group. Right? I used to see them sort of like the UN. But not, they're a private group, and they run according to their own mandates. And I think, and when you actually use their information, you actually sort of really drill down to it. You got lots of pretty graphs with percentages on them, but when you actually try to get time to when you want actual numbers, their reports are useless. And so I think the IEA's job is to obfuscate and muddy the waters as we approach peak oil and everything about it. So everything appears to be fine. It's fine. Stage your post, use your credit card. It's all good. But yeah, and I think the EIA do the same thing.
Yep.
And it's a bit depressing when you find that out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, it's kind of interesting that Rystad seems to be almost close to the truth,
Yeah. And they don't heavily advertise their stuff. So I'm here. This is the EIA website. EIA is .gov. So are you saying this one is a private or
no? IEA, International Energy Agency. EIA is government, right? But everything in the United States government seems to be really political now.
Yeah.
That there was a time when the data could be trusted, not anymore.
No.
I guess because the data's not looking good now.
That's also true.
When
Yeah,
it was
so-
looking good, they could give you the truth. Now that it's not, they don't want to. Oh,
Yeah.
I have a question here from Annie Bjorkman. Can you ask Simon what type of education he thinks is useful in the future? I'm considering geology and climate or metallurgy.
Well, do you want to take that now, or John, do you want to run your sequence and keep going, because you've got some good stuff there, mate.
Oh, I'm done.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Education. So that's a tough one. Now, when I was actually employing people and managing them 10 years ago, and they were coming through school, it was apparent even then that the world had changed compared to when I'd gone through. For example, I'm starting to get worried that the institution of the university is starting to fail. The quality of what's being taught is degrading while fees are going up. And when you come out of university, you've got this big debt, and then you try and go and get a job. There are no jobs. And when you do get a job, the wage is shite for the first 10 years of your career. And see, back in the 70s, getting a degree was the best thing to do. As for usefulness, anything in the core sciences, I think, will be useful, because we will need technical problem solvers of all kinds, scientists and engineers, people who can think, people who can flexibly problem solve, and whatnot, I think will be very useful. Anything in the materials sector, to metallurgy, physical metallurgy or mineral processing, all of it will be useful somewhere, somehow, because we will need a colossal amount of it. What I would suggest is the degree on its own is not enough. In parallel to that, you need other skill sets. That talks to Andrew's world that he was just describing earlier. You know, the ability to fix stuff, the ability to grow stuff, make your own food, grow your own food, sorry, make your own goods. So what I would, if I was starting again, right, I would probably go for a combination of science and engineering again. But earlier in the piece, I would also have a part of my education to physically do things. What is most important is not what degree you've got, but your ability to think flexibly, to problem solve in the face of adversity, and to think outside the box, because the box is not your friend.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that another thing is that if you have a bunch of money and you're choosing between, like, say, $100,000 investing into a degree, well, I would recommend buying some land instead at this
Make
point.
sure you own it outright.
Yeah, exactly. Not like renting land, but owning land. And then
yeah,
you'd be in a much better position in the future.
So when you don't have anything, a bank mortgage associated with it in any way. Even a small mortgage will be a problem, because people will get squeezed on the ground. And we're moving into a phase 2 where the law is going to be used and weaponized against the average people on the ground. It's a survival step for governments. We've seen it historically so many times. For their own survival, this is what they'll do. So that's what I'm saying. Be flexible. Don't be attached to anything. What you've really got is yourself. Yeah. So my attempts to actually sort of generate wealth through the transition and come out the other side have not worked, because my second marriage crashed, and during that divorce, all assets got scrapped. And coming out of that, I'm now paying child support. So my plans to actually sort of meet these challenges have failed. All I've got is a pile of books and some tools and some ideas, and that's it. Right? And so maybe I'm not the right person to ask such questions, because I haven't had the success that I hoped. Yeah.
I hear you. Well, for those people who are interested in the land bit, so if you have a 6 months of winter, or 6 months growing season rather, then 1 hectare per person, which is 2.5 acres, should suffice. if you manage it really well. But that's an absolute minimum, because I know some people think, oh, I'll just get a suburban plot and grow all my own food. No, that's not big enough. You need many acres in order to do it. All right. So also we wanted to talk about the billionaires and stuff. Simon, did you have something you wanted to show us today?
I do have two things of interest.
Okay.
I don't know if I mentioned this before. I'm doing a study for Hawaii.
Oh.
What would Hawaii have to do to phase out fossil fuels?
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's just part of a larger plan of mine, but probably won't go to completion because I found more interesting things to do. But the idea was Hawaii was an isolated system. Its boundaries are quite clear. It's also heavily dependent on people importing things. They're heavily dependent on oil for electricity, and they're a tourist economy. So they're going to be a very interesting case study. What do they have to do to phase out fossil fuels? So I've got 8 scenarios,
Mm-hmm.
or rather, I found this space is very tribal. Everyone's got a hobby horse. And so what I've done is taken every tribe with its platitude and turn it into a policy and turn those policies into numbers. For example, we will power everything in Hawaii with wave power. Okay, so I get an example of a wave power unit. How big is it? What capacity does it generate? And what does it need? Right, for example, the biggest ones that I've found are 750 kilowatts installed power. How many do we need? And the answer is a couple of thousand. And then we say, well, Hawaii only has a certain length of tidal coastline. And so I think, well, if you're going to do that, you're going to need 11. Yeah, the one of the picture on the left, the orange. See the orange one? That's the one I've been modeling. We're going to need 11 of those every mile around the tidal. I think it's 11. It's either 7 or 11. I can't remember off the top, but a lot of them every mile around the tidal coastline. If we were to do that, not practical, right? So I went through that, and so wind, solar, tidal, geothermal. So geothermal's on the island, but there's an indigenous population that doesn't want geothermal to happen because they see the volcano as a religious deity. What would happen if you install a nuclear power plant, for example? Anyway, all that. The biggest task in all scenarios is the phasing out of fossil fuel powered trucks. We're talking about 80% of the energy, or between 78 and 86 across the scenarios, go to finding a substitute for trucks, whether they're electric vehicles or hydrogen fuel cells or they're ammonia fueled. So trucks are doing most of the energy. They're doing most of the work, and in terms of actually phasing them out, they're taking most of the energy. Most. And so when you actually look at the whole pie, outside electrical power generation, it's still between 53 and 60%. So it's enormous. Now, what that comes down to is Alice Friedemann wrote a book called When Trucks Stop Running. If you haven't read it now, get it, read it. She was right.
It's a good one. It's a good one.
Right. So what that means, though, is the architecture around trucking transport has happened because how we've evolved over the last century. Yeah, that's it. So when we're saying we're going to phase out fossil fuels and assuming society is going to be the same, right there is the data to show that that's not the case. So society will have to reorder itself around, well, we're going to have to do transport a different way. We're going to have to, not need to transport things such a long distance or so much stuff a long distance, or we're going to have to find a different way of doing that.
Yeah.
Right. And so that is actually what I'm recommending to the Hawaiian government. And there are some ideas to look at this. They're just not going to like them.
Well, I think for Hawaii, the food forest thing should work because they've got a lot of rain there.
Water's a problem because the soil doesn't hold the water.
That's why the perennials, because the trees will hold the water.
So they've also got the problem of outside of food. They're entirely dependent on imports for everything, and the entire system's a tourist economy. No one wants to be growing food, They have no industry there to speak of. Right. Anyway, so it's a very interesting case study. The second thing to bring to the audience is one of the scenarios, the last one, was what would happen if we tried to apply the circular economy to Hawaii. And this is really interesting. So far, I've mapped the shit out of the whole system. I've got every piece of information I can get for this one little area on the planet, and very little of that information is useful for the circular economy. Right? It doesn't include energy. It just assume energy happens.
That's unfortunate.
It just assumes, for example, transport happens. Or they say things like, "Oh, it'll be electric vehicles," or "We'll get our power from wind and solar," but they don't say how or where. And so the amount of infrastructure required to build out a post-fossil fuels energy and transport system is about 95% of the effort, compared to that last 5% is building in a recycling system to capture the resources that you do use and then do something with them. At the moment in Hawaii, there's very little recycling and there's very little manufacturing. So everything still has to be imported. What do you do with the waste? We've got to export it. So they're still dependent on ships coming. And back to where we were. And so the things like, well, maybe we should start looking at sail-based shipping again.
Yeah.
Right. Or a combination of sail and something else, like a hybrid ship, like a different kind of ship. But none of this is actually very palatable for the average civil servant, in the Hawaiian government at the moment. And these guys are going to be asked to review this report. They also have no authority over me with regard to whether the report gets published or not. Right. And so I can see a few difficult conversations coming.
I know there is one example of the circular economy of Tikopia. They've been they have the food forests. They've been doing for 3,000 years. It's a high island, and well, that's one system that if they manage to adapt it to Hawaii, then it could work.
Well, how many people? There's 1.2 million people in Hawaii. They're heavily dependent on transport and technology. Their skill base is very far away from what you're proposing there. One of the outcomes is to depopulate the state. That's going to be very popular.
Well, I actually, if I remember correctly, they were within carrying capacity for Hawaii. Like it seems, but I don't know. Maybe that includes some of the uninhabitable portions.
Well, they've got this massive national park on the main island, and so there's a lot of forestry there that they're not allowed to touch.
My wife is Hawaiian, and so I know a little bit about Hawaii. And the thing about Hawaii is everybody is on Oahu. Like 90% of the population is on Oahu. But of course, Maui was the traditional capital of Hawaii. And at one point, there was an awful lot of shipping that kind of went in and out of Hawaii. And of course, the whalers were there too. So there was a way to get things around from island to island. And of course, that was sail. And I kind of feel like the places with the best harbors and the best possibilities are going to be the ones that actually survive on Hawaii. I think Honolulu is just an effective air travel and choosing one island and making that the big place that everybody goes to. So I think maybe people might get spread around the islands. I know my wife's relatives live on all three islands. They live in Oahu, Maui, and the Big Island. And her great-grandfather was a cowboy on the Big Island. So each of the islands was used for something sort of different. And there were actually things growing there. Of course, there was a giant pineapple plantation. So I think there are going to be possibilities of, Hawaii's going to fare better than a lot of places because it's got all that coastline.
So it's all good and well. All those things are good. The problem is trying to actually keep the existing capacity going to replace the existing system. And actually put it in. You might say forget it, but this is what the European Commission is saying the green transition is what it's for and what it can do. And the purpose of this report is to call bullshit on that premise with numbers.
Yeah, I'm looking at Oahu, and it's definitely way over carrying capacity. It says 657 per kilometer squared, and I think the carrying capacity is something like 200 for tropical islands, like in Tikopia. Tikopia, they have, I think it was 1,000 people for 500 hectares.
So carrying capacity and everything, all good and well, but are we going to maintain any kind of technology or industry at all? Right. If the answer is not, then we go back to living in a way that before white settlers, European settlers turned up. Right? Yeah. If we are going to try and maintain technology and an energy system, how do we do that? In what form and what for?
Yeah, I think that in terms of the energy system, you're right in terms that we would need to have like at the city level, like a thorium reactor or something.
Well, if that's actually one of the scenarios I call the purple transition, because the green transition isn't going to work.
No.
The purple transition is based on different technologies. There's a degrowth scenario in there too. Like if you were to cut the whole system down to say 1/3 of its existing size, what would that change? And one of the interesting things is if you did that with the green transition, you still don't have enough space. Solar panels and wind turbines, right? So degrowth on its own is not enough. You need to actually completely scrap all the existing assumptions and rebuild everything with genuinely new ideas. So yeah. Anyway, they're just the two things that have come up since we last spoke. Trucks is the heart of the architecture of our current system, right? And they have to go. But when they go, what do we replace them with to do the same? If we don't want to do the same things, what are we going to do in their place?
So I was thinking probably the most energy efficient are railroads. I haven't done all the calculations on it, but I know they're 10 times cheaper to build per kilometer than an asphalt road. And then because the grade is only 2 to 3%, the acceleration stays for longer, and you don't lose as much going up and down hills.
I do have a cunning plan, right? And this is actually what I was going to put in the Venus Project ideas. It does change the idea of what a truck does. So we're going to move stuff around, but often it's along the same predetermined route. Trucks going back and forth, say between cities, for example. And there's a system on a mine site where you've got it's like a conveyor belt, but it's an underslung pod full of ore, and the pod is actually on a series of pylons. So instead of actually having to engineer a road so it's nice and flat, right, with support, you can have pylons popping up on any landscape you want, and it can be as high or as low as you want. Right.
So, is that like a cable?
Hang on. Let me, instead of trying to describe, I'll see if I can find it. So this is actually something I saw in a mine site proposal, and I've decided to actually poach it and merge it with the idea of the monorail.
Oh yeah.
So this is poaching.
Yeah. Okay. Well, here I'll stop screen sharing and then you can share yours.
Yeah, where is it? Okay. So this is actually something I'm. See, we've yet to put this through a feasibility study. Okay, here we are. Transport. So the first thing to change transport. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. I was in Amsterdam, cool city by the way, and I saw a couple of things there. One was the humble bicycle was given its own transport system with traffic lights.
Yeah.
Right. So you had roads, but you also had bicycles and footpaths, each with their separate traffic lights. That they weren't just like one wasn't an afterthought, and there were so many bicycles. And I've never been closer to being run over by a bicycle than in Amsterdam because there's so many of them. What I also saw was under the train station. They had this humongous bicycle store place. So usually when you put like lots of bicycles, it's like a great big pile and it's a mess. And what do you do? And they've actually engineered the equivalent of a underground heated car park for bicycles. Wow. 7,000 bicycles, and they're all stacked in rows, and you can actually find exactly where your bicycle is, and you can get in and out easily. So it's engineered. Second thing was, this is one of Jacques Fresco's ideas, where he came up with the idea of a monorail, but he did this in 1975, which back then it was considered radical, but now we've got them. So now we've got this idea of a monorail. And so the idea I was just telling you about before is figure 18 here, where it's like an underslung cargo pod, and they're able to move heavy masses of stuff long distances quickly and efficiently. Right, and the idea is this: figure 19, you have a monorail, a two-way monorail on top, and a two-way underslung system that moves shipping containers underneath. So on the same thing, you're moving large amounts of people and large amounts of physical goods, and then they can be dropped down or picked up or moved sideways or whatever, just like what happens in an Amazon shipping, Amazon packaging, where packages move through their factory and they go up and down different conveyor belts. You could have a system that does that across set paths. You're always going along the same routes. And if you contract down what you need to transport and how far you need to transport, but when you do transport, you transport at a higher level of quality, right? So you simplify things down, but what you do, you do it better, and you build to last. Once it's built, it stays built. Right? And this thing can run off electricity, which means you can run it off whatever power grid you need. So there will be trucks on the road, but there'll be much less of them. And they will share the road with pedestrians and bicycles. Anyway, so that's yeah. So
yeah, this is something I've been thinking about. Is exactly what I've been thinking, that we should have done this a century ago. It's just crazy what the infrastructure that we have right now, because this is so much more efficient.
Yeah.
And it takes care of the self-steering problem, right? It could drive itself, and having it up means that you're not running over people and small critters all the time, right? Among many other issues that our current transportation system has.
I know, just on this topic, I was reading like extraterrestrial contactee reports and things like that, and one of them was saying that on their planet everything is a rail system, because they just found it to be the most efficient system. And then they also use hydro pump storage for all their battery backups, and so there's that. And I have a comment here from the YouTube from Dan A. Tourist economy will collapse once we lack cheap energy for transportation. It's simply too late to save the status quo with green transition. Fair enough. And then someone else was laughing at the idea of bicycles in the U.S. I guess because in America it's a cultural thing.
Yes.
Yeah, true. That's true. So it's very much a cultural thing in Amsterdam, but in Australia and the United States they will laugh at you. Because the way cities are set up and spread out, and it's just not things that have to be rebuilt, and they'd only be rebuilt when they have no choice. So it's an idea to put forward, and it probably has its place, but I've yet to see a magic bullet that fixes everything. So yeah,
it would be good to see a cost comparison between the railroad thing and what you were talking about as well. Ivor?
Well, I think that we're gonna the lowest energy ways of getting things around, of course, is water, and I think like barge canals, etc., were the things that really move things around early on. And I think what you don't realize, there was a huge infrastructure attached to that. there were also to these ports were ports because there were lots of people who, lived there and fitted out the ships and dealt with things. So I think that's going to be a big part of it. Is you're going to have to try to figure out ways of getting things around with almost no energy, which is sail and rail. Actually, if they can get rail going, sail and rail is, I think, the best combination for making things actually move around. And you forget there still are all these barge canals are still there. I used to,
Yeah.
a kid, I used to, not a kid, as a college student, I used to row on the Erie Canal. We used to row shells on the Erie Canal. So the Erie Canal still exists, and it moves from lake to lake nowadays. It doesn't really go on that actual Erie Canal anymore, and it's just a way to move things around. And of course, the Great Lakes is a great giant inland sea to move things around. So I think that's we're going to go back to that whether we like it or not. It's going to slowly but surely become the way to move things. And sorry, if you're not sort of on that one of those things or on the ocean, ocean ports, I think they're going to dwindle to very little, or they're going to be places where
Well,
things
sail.
grow. Yeah. If you're not some way to get things around, then you're going to be basically in the rural economy where you make things and then try to get them to a market.
Yeah, definitely. I think the waterways are going to be a primary means of transport, especially in North America, and because we have like all of these canal systems, and it is the cheapest way of moving things around, and like the water basins in Canada and in the U.S. can be linked up through the Great Lakes and things like that.
Oh yeah, I mean, basically you have a port that goes all the way from, the Gaspé all the way through to the end of Lake Superior. You could, with different barges and things, you can get all the way from place to place with different canals.
Mhm.
But I think the rest of it is going to become less and less accessible, unfortunately.
Right.
Same thing with Europe. I mean, Europe has these big rivers that go right through the middle of it, so that's why Europe was such a useful place, even pre-industrially.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, Europe has a lot of canal systems as well.
Yeah, and it has the big rivers, a bunch of big rivers. As long as,
Like the Danube. Yeah.
yeah, as long as climate change and allows us enough water to float things.
Mhm.
That's my personal feeling. I don't think we're going to be able to keep up as much stuff as we're doing. We will be able to keep some rail going, but I can't see the whole system that we have now. After having driven through Boston a couple of weeks ago, I just realized how ridiculous it is to try to move all these people, trucks, everything through that city with highways and vehicles. It's not going to last very long. The quality of the roads is going to go down. There were some gigantic potholes on the road going through Boston. I was thinking it doesn't take too many of them before you just destroy your vehicles.
Mhm.
And then the whole thing doesn't work. The whole thing barely works now. So.
Well, one of the big things will be like, how do we move people from the cities where, I mean, they won't be able to get enough food to the country? And I know the biggest hurdles seem to be political and cultural in terms of, those people who are like, no, we'll never run out of oil, don't even talk about it. And then there's, the people who are hoarding large amounts of land and they don't want to share, and things like that.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be a mad scramble for a whole different bunch of resources. All of a sudden, people are going to realize that things that were not very useful for a very long time, all of a sudden become useful again.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Like wharfs, like places to land a boat, and places to grow some food.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Dune, you got to unmute.
Yeah, I don't know why we're actually talking about transport, really. I mean, everything has to go back to a relocalization of virtually our whole lifestyle. Um, uh, and we can go back to John Peach's actual presentation here and really say that there's a transport fuel and there's a non-transport fuel. Peter Starr, I saw in um, a post a while back, divided it into shopping fuel and shopping fuel and work fuel. And I think John needs to actually take heed with this and actually take away the shopping fuel part of the equation and look at the transport part, and you'll find that things are going to be way, way different. And that's going to imply that really transport's not going to be the issue. It's how do we relocalize and how do people live in a future where there isn't government institutions of great distance. Back to the counties sort of idea of Andre's here. So that's the way I'd like to see it. So John.
Yeah, I think you're right. Once we run out of heavy oil, we're not going to do shopping anymore.
Yeah, it's a great analog actually. Shopping fuel versus working fuel.
Well, a lot of it is that Eroy stuff, and right, shale was like 5, right? So apparently 5 is enough to truck commodities other than fuel. So we would be able to truck the grain, but we wouldn't be able to pay the farmers or the truck drivers. So I don't know. Like they say that if we go below 7, just a whole system will collapse because people won't have an incentive to go to work.
Yeah.
To deliver the food to the grocery stores or to that kind of stuff. So we might have like a command economy at some point, but it'll collapse. Command economies in that setting would collapse as well because you wouldn't be able to afford the security guards. The security guards would just walk off the jobs and they would stop enforcing.
So I should probably take Simon's idea and extend this, take the quality of the fuel and the EROI at the same time and look at them.
Mm-hmm.
So where that idea came from, in my world, we've got what's called the critical raw minerals map. We've got a map, and on one axis you've got economic importance, on the other map you've got the CRM map, and you've got perceived scarcity, and it's a really primitive formula, and it's based around the way things are now. I was going to scrap that. There's a big one in that's probably a good one. I was going to scrap that and actually have, say, 4 axes, right, but have things like exergy, the energy it takes to extract your unit out to the point where it's useful. And another axis could be scarcity, or like how much is left in terms of resources, and what do you have to do to get those resources. And I had 4 planned, and so what you would do is you'd see different graphs that would show different things related to pertinent information to that resource. Everyone wants to know about price, market price. Problem is, now that we've got double-digit inflation figures in multiple countries now, price is about to be subject to hyperinflation in some form, I believe. So if you take the time to actually write a report based on price, you're going to get your ass handed to you very easily. And so you've got to step around that and go to physical reality somehow. That's what I came up with. And it really struck me when you were presenting today that the oil industry could take a really big step forward if someone was to do that. And there's really only very few people who are credible enough to do that, and you're one of them.
Thank you. Yeah, it probably take me a little while to dig through this, but it does seem like might be a useful thing to look at.
Wounds heal and chicks dig scars.
Mm-hmm.
Get to work.
Okay. I gotta go now.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, you're not? Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah. I found this inflation chart that was showing up before there. Yeah, so Egypt 32%, Sudan 152%, Chad these 6. So
Yeah, you see, that's
Mongolia.
United States is at 0. That's got
well
to be bullshit.
2.8.
See, that's bullshit. That's got to be bullshit.
Mhm.
It's probably like Shadow Stats. They've got that website that looks at the real numbers. Numbers all around the world, and Australia is probably more cooked than anywhere else. The United States certainly is. Shadow Stats.
Stacks.
Stats. STAT.
Oh, stats.
Like statistics.
Yes, shadow government
Yeah,
statistics.
right.
Okay.
And so, and even that website doesn't include everything, but it's a bit probably closer to the truth. Like there's now a U.S. national debt of 34 trillion. Yeah,
Mhm.
There you go. See, that's
So official CPI, and this is the 1990 base.
it's over 10% there.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Liar,
Yeah.
liar, pants on fire.
Yeah. So it's not 2.8 or what it was claiming over there. What was it? Yeah,
So-
2.8. And
So all statistics, all things quoted out by governments and corporations and blue chips, academia, it's all horseshit. All of it. Trust none of it. It's to the point now where we've got to do our own stuff or die trying.
Well, I'm just amazed at how much of Europe is in that orange zone that is showed, just like most of Africa, Latin America, Russia, Australia. It seems like, what is that? Okay, Russia's 6. It seems
0.3.
like seems like worldwide is basically that orange, which is around 6 or 7% inflation,
Add
which
10%.
which is what
Wow.
ours is, or maybe, but 3 to 10%, which is basically what ours is with the shadow stats. So I think they're trying to make it look like it's not happening, but it's like when you have a 10% inflation rate, that's everybody in the world gets a 10% pay cut every year.
So
Mhm.
I think of it.
a friend of mine in Australia went to the supermarket and bought a bag of groceries. He spent $70 on a single bag of groceries.
Oh yeah.
Now,
Wow.
we describe what he bought. I would expect us to pay, say, $4 or $5, 10, 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've got this idea prices go up all the time. But yeah, anyway, so we're in a sea of deceit at the moment. Flamboyant bullshit.
Yeah.
Everywhere you look.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know there's like a lot of like shrinkflation with these CPI things. Like the bread gets smaller, but it's the same. But they say it's the same price in order to skew the numbers. There's a lot of things they do for cooking the numbers on the consumer price index.
Yeah, shadow stats has us between 8 and 10%, which makes sense because that's what the whole rest of the world is. And you think about it, money moves around the world so quickly that there can't be any place that is, okay, you can have obviously countries that go way differently, but I mean the major currencies, the EU, the dollar, and the yuan, are probably all about the same. 8 to 10%, 7 to 10%,
Mm-hmm.
which is that's significant. That's not going to hold. That's not going to hold because people start to figure out other ways of trying to hold their value at that stage.
Yeah. So
yeah, I know. I lived in Guatemala, and the inflation rate was ridiculous. So what we would do is one time a year, the U.S. government would allow us to change quetzales to dollars 1 for 1, and then you just took a taxi ride and you doubled your money once a year. So it's interesting that some of these other places, Brazil, etc., are not as bad as the rest of the world. They're so it just shows you the big currencies aren't really holding as well as they used to.
Well, yeah, some people are somehow still alive in like Argentina with 93%.
No, they don't hold their money in the Argentinian. I forget what the name of the currency is, and they don't. They try not to you really got to play some serious games to hang on to it. In Mexico, even it used to be in Mexico. Mexico's not much worse than us, but in Mexico, everybody would hold their money in U.S. dollars or something. So they'd keep it out of the country, etc. They try to figure out a way to live, and of course,
I know Milei, the new Argentinian president, wants to go over to the USD or something like that.
yes, he wants to go to the U.S. dollar, which is interesting because so they're all everybody's playing a game to try to hang on to it. I think we'll have to go back to a currency that's based on something like silver or gold, but
what isn't Russia doing that?
Russia's doing that. They're going back to a partial gold-based currency, but there isn't that much gold and silver around, so it's very hard to base it on it.
Yeah, I actually proposed in a meeting with ministers of parliament, Finnish ministers of parliament, that we should have a currency backed by mineral resources, because every country's got mineral resources, and that's what we actually need. We don't build bridges with gold.
No.
And so, and I said we should, when the euro defaults and crashes, and everyone in the room, their sphincter contracted. It was hilarious to watch. and I said we should bring back the old Finnish currency, and I put a picture of the old coin up, and everyone's eyes just bulged. You can't say that.
Well, they actually had Russia actually had platinum coins, I think. So it's not just gold.
Oh, yeah.
Russia had a platinum coin at one point, and that was early. That was around 1900.
Wow.
So you could, and until 1960, the 1960s, and some places earlier, most countries had silver-based coins. But they sort of lost it, and now they're just printed as they're bullion.
There's bullion, yeah.
So they have a value on them, but they're not real.
I think I remember the Federal Reserve, or they have a titanium coin with Obama on it.
Well, that was the idea of like issuing a coin and just having $1 trillion on it.
$1 trillion coin. That's right.
$1 trillion coin. They could put 34 of them out there and just buy back all the debt or something. That was a kind of a creative solution.
Here's a good one for you. So there is a company called Forever Spin that makes these little metal tops that are machined out of pure metals like copper. Yeah, foreverspin.com. Right. One of the metals they've got in there, that's them, is called humanium. Right. It's on the list there. And what it's actually made of is guns that have been confiscated from gun runners. Yeah, there it is, humanium.
Cool.
Read what it says it actually is.
World's most valuable metal.
Does it actually say where it is? So it's metal that's actually made from guns confiscated from gun runners or something like that.
Made of recycled metal from seized illegal firearms.
Right, so start minting coins out of that stuff.
We talk in Australia. We talk here about our currency based on pumpkins.
Right.
Yes.
Well, there you go. Yeah. So it's
how long did they last?
So
you eat them.
Yeah. Go away. That's good. If it's
people don't eat them in America, but they do in Australia.
Oh no,
we eat pumpkins.
I just chopped up a blue Hubbard, which is quite a procedure, but we ate on it for like a month. Giant old blue Hubbard, they're like this big. You have to use that.
That's the Queensland blue here.
Yeah, they're great, but it takes a lot of work to get them usable. But then you just put them in the fridge.
Need a chainsaw to get inside.
Oh yeah, but then you can cook. You can toast. We toasted the seeds and everything too. So, put a little salt and olive oil on them. They're really nice.
Yeah. So
there is the idea of a currency that's made in a thing that that goes. So pumpkins, the thing about the pumpkin economy is you would have to spend your pumpkins quickly because they're going to go bad. So there is the idea of having basing an economy on something that actually goes, that is, goes away.
Yeah. Well, they say, money doesn't grow on trees, but if you do the food forest thing, it can. And actually, the highest energy density food we can get is nuts, and they store pretty well. So if you did like a hazelnut-based currency, it could kind of work, and you could make biodiesel with it too. I have a few questions here. Okay, I saw writing on the wall. Got my 6 acres in 2014. Live down here, get around in horse and buggies because they're Amish. How long will that last? It will actually last a very long time. They're one of the few types of lifestyle that is actually sustainable. And so the Mass Dreams of the Future was saying, like, by 2100, this rustic lifestyle, there'll be about like 40% of people on land or more, maybe 60. And then it says, so I just did a show in the Great Lakes, specifically Lake Erie and Ice. I lived here 20 years. Love the lakes. Okay. Do you guys know any subscription services to keep track of peak oil, coal, minerals? Highly recommended to me. Our Finite World by Gail Tverbrugg. You guys want to comment on that? I know Art Berman has a good Twitter on it. I'm not familiar with it.
So there's a lot of them. Right, well, not a lot, but there's a couple of good ones. Right, so Gail Tverbrugg, world-class, top-notch stuff. Her work is not understood well enough, and it's not dispersed enough. Alice Friedemann, the energy skeptic, also does excellent work. So just get that one up. The energy skeptic. So she writes the educated layperson, but her work actually has numbers behind it. Some, much more than the average person. So she's good. She's also the one that wrote When Trucks Stop Running.
Yes.
Chris Martinson, Peak Prosperity.
Peak Prosperity. There it is.
Yep, that's him. So, and he did what was called the Crash Course. If you look up the Crash Course up on YouTube, that's actually an excellent resource to actually get your arms around what the hell is happening. And there's like 20, 25, 30 chapters on YouTube, and he takes it through in a way where anyone can understand it. So it's on YouTube. Let's just get that one up first.
Peak Prosperity.
Crash Course.
The Crash Course. There it is.
Okay, so you've actually got a so
maybe he has a playlist.
So there's a
the
whole
Crash
lot of them.
Course. There.
So that the Crash Course, and there's like that's them. Chapter 1, 2, 3. Yeah, okay. That's actually probably the place to start to get your arms around what's happening. Okay, Art Berman, Labyrinth Consulting.
Art Berman.
And then you got our own John Peach.
Oh, yeah.
So between Art and John, they're the two analysts that I go to understand the oil side of things. Yep, right. And then you've got John Peach.
John Peach.
So I don't know if you've got a website, John, but the work that you put out is actually more sophisticated than most other groups that I've seen.
Yeah, I do, but it's not strictly to do energy analysis.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
What was your website?
It's Wild Peaches.
Wild Peaches. Oh, okay.
.xyz.
So. So these are the people to actually sort of try and get your way through. There's so much smoke and mirrors in the official data now. You need people who know what they're doing to help you navigate through it. Right? There's malicious insertion of difficult issues in the data, which are really obscure things, and they do it on purpose because the data's not very good. The other one would be Shadow Stats, which you've already had up.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's Nate Higgins.
Yeah, hang on. Great Simplification, Nate Hagens.
Great simplification. There it is. Higgins.
Yep, that's it. He has top-notch guests on every now and then. And the US debtclock.org is what I use to keep tabs on. They're trying to get the best numbers they can. So in here, that's the US, but you've also got world clocks as well. In the top left hand, world clock. So you've got how each nation around the world's doing. To put that in context, when you have a debt to GDP ratio that passes 90%, that was believed to be the crossing the Rubicon point, where you had no longer you had to go into debt, further into debt, to maintain your economy and service that debt. So 90%, and so the debt to GDP ratio for a lot of them are over 90%.
Yeah,
and so
Japan's at 295%.
Well, Ireland used to be over 1,000 in 2008, and they got reamed. They got absolutely reamed. And now Australia has that position that Ireland was going into 2008. Anyway, so in terms of data to actually collect things from, OECD's good. Well, all of these sites have problems with their data, but these are the blue chip sources. OECD, BP Statistics, Benchmark Minerals, USGS. Now, the USGS, US Geological Survey, is extremely rubbery in their numbers. You look at the numbers from year to year; they go up and down for no apparent reason. And so I smell a rat, maybe several. Yeah, right. And so you've got to use discernment, and that's why you need someone who knows what they're doing to analyze the data and guide you through this. But I encourage everyone to give it a go and start to become that person, or at least so they actually understand the more technical language. So when John or Art starts throwing oil terms at you, which there are a lot, you actually understand what they're saying.
Great. So, got more here. That's why I grow my own food. Request next time you guys go through the Tesla Master Plan Part 3. I don't know what that is.
All right. So I think I pissed off Elon Musk. Because Tesla Master Plan 3, he had like his Innovation Day. And in the beginning of it, he actually sort of had a part about how mining's not a problem. We've got plenty of we've got plenty of stuff. This is what we need to do. It's all good. There's no problems. But a lot of what he actually presented from a mining point of view was actually sort of quite juvenile, as in comparing, like, say, the volumes of gold being extracted to coal. Coal's a bulk commodity. We're extracting more of it. So if you take out coal, therefore mining's so much smaller, it's not a problem anymore, right? But there's no understanding at all of resources and reserves and mining and supply of raw materials through all that. He also proposed that he's got a battery that uses NMC 532 chemistry that does not have lithium in it. So, all right, no lithium, problems are over. We're back on. But unfortunately, it's got other metals in it, like nickel and manganese and cobalt and graphite. And so,
cobalt. Yeah. Well, that's a big problem.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Well, anyways, it depends on how much, but I mean that's from the Congo.
So I do like Elon Musk, right? But he's a businessman and he's trying to protect his markets, right? And what I have actually put out there hurts his markets, so I think I might have pissed him off. And that's what he's actually sort of put up in response to that. Oh well.
Did he actually respond to you personally?
No. The reason I think I pissed him off is some of the numbers he uses in there happen to mirror the numbers I put together.
Yep.
And the IEA started to do that, and someone the IEA, International Energy Agency, will not acknowledge I exist, right? But someone told me in the IEA that they watch me very carefully. They watch all my podcasts. They're probably watching now. Fuck you guys. But they watch my stuff very carefully. They go over it with a fine tooth comb, and some of their new reports, it's clear that they're using my work in some form. Right. And
yeah, they've got
right, and so yeah, and so Elon Musk's team has done something similar, where the numbers they actually use, for example, the size of the car fleet, I think was the one in particular, happened to mirror what I'd actually put together, and no one else had done that. So okay, I take it as a compliment.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to be famous. I don't necessarily need acknowledgement, but that little thank you.
It's always nice, eh? Yeah. I know. At the county, I'm often emailing them, and they often I see the effects of like the things that I said, like they do presentations and they talk about it, but they don't necessarily mention me. But that's fine. But I do know that that was one of the things we were going to talk about is those billionaires, billionaire bunkers, and the whole idea of all of these billionaire bunkers is, well, it's not a very good idea because if you have a bunch of resources, then other people might want to get them, and so I think it's more important to create kind of a county area of people who are all sustainable, rather than trying to do it in one little bunker, because I mean there's a limited amount of food you can store and things like that. But I don't know. You guys want to address that? Did you have any thoughts on doomsday bunkers?
Yeah, they're bullshit.
Yeah.
So, okay, there's a computer game called Fallout,
Mm-hmm.
which everyone likes and everything like that. But it's all a game and everything. But if you're actually going to sit in a bunker and have everything, and you're going to do that, but when you actually open the door and you come out, then you've got to work out how to live again and set up and everything like that. But the problem with the bunker is you're not evolving yourself in the face of reality. You're stepping out of reality. Right. So you're running away from problems, hoping in the continuity of government documents that were developed in the late 70s that were then updated around 2008 for the United States. One of the plans that was in the fine print was a part of the United States government and military would retreat into a deep underground military bunker, also known as a DUM, for 18 months with everything it needed, and then they would just let people on the surface tear themselves apart, and they were going to come out and confront what's left of humanity with their guns after 18 months. And so, but when I actually sort of looked at the game theory sort of thing, that might have some short-term gains, but in the medium and the long term, they will have destroyed themselves. Because what has to happen is if we go through these changes as a society, we've got to evolve as a group. In the face of that adversity, people who step out of that sequence and come back, they're left behind the 8 ball. It's like it's like your body getting immune to the local flu season. Each year you've got to have that flu. Leave planet Earth for 10 years and come back, and you get the flu. You're done.
Yeah, it's true. Yes, you have to continuously expose yourself to.
So pain. We need pain.
I had an interesting experience. I was showing my film Peak Oil, a love story. I would show it around different places. So I went up to around the Sugarloaf area, which is a ski area, and I showed my film, and not very many people were interested in it, but this one guy shows up, and he was pretty interesting because he had heard about Peak Oil from the person he was working for, and what he was doing was he had heavy equipment. So he would fix up these little farms out in the middle of nowhere in Maine. He would start working on a building for this person and really doing things. And what he said was the reason that when he asked the guy, why are you doing this? These are places that they're called intervale farms. Why are you doing this? And the guy said, well, if things get really bad, I want to have a place to go to disappear to that's not too far from the border with Canada. And he said, these are oil people from down in Texas. And they just know how bad things could get. And so they thought they want a place to just skip to be able to take off from there and maybe have a nice farm where food is growing, etc. And, somebody takes care of it. So they wanted a little hidey hole. So I'll bet you people are already sort of thinking about that. They're already figuring out ways of sort of disappearing or finding a little place to hide out. And I think that's a better idea than the bunker. I think the bunker is a little severe, but
so the bunker's like a safety net.
Yeah.
Right, and it's not good enough. Now, if you've got like a bunker, it's like the idea of defending a homestead that you cannot leave. It becomes a static point, and your thinking comes around, I must defend this static point. When really what's required is for you to be flexible on all levels and all things. And if you have to move around, you move around. If you have to do something else, you do something else. If you become, I must defend my stuff, then you're boned. Because stuff is the one thing that must change. And so you must become the strongest link in the change, you personally. Your family, your associates, the people around you, your friends, have got to be the strong partner, and all the stuff has to be the afterthought. So no matter what life throws at you, you can step around it. But if you're in a bunker, your thinking all of a sudden becomes literally walled in.
Yeah. So I actually did a bunch of research on the underground military bases, and it's all classified or with whistleblowers and all that. And so we have like a network of these deep underground military bases, and so that they actually ran into multiple problems. So one of the issues was that when they put people underground, is that the women stopped menstruating because they didn't have the lunar cycles to keep them in sync. And so that they have to use, artificial insemination in order for any kind of reproduction. And so they're actually in the mass dreams of the future, I think it was like about 30% of people that are alive in 2100 are living in these deep underground military bases. So it's kind of a dystopian nightmare where they're all like basically in jumpsuits or prison uniforms, and then they if they rebel, they get sent outside in a leaky spacesuit. And there's actually a Silo series which is completely about this. It's a fiction, but it's basically covers basically the lifestyle of people living in deep underground military bases, and if they rebel, they get sent out in a leaky spacesuit, and the bases are surrounded by poison gas, and then everyone watches them die as they walk out.
Well, after thinking about this, your thinking and your ability to problem solve and connect with the people around you is by far the most important thing going forward. That flexibility is more important than your education, right? Your ability to learn. Now, if you take the point where you stitch yourself up in a bunker, right, then you have seriously handicapped yourself to do that in the hope the stuff that you have stored is what you need. And it most certainly will not be enough.
Mm-hmm.
It's attractive, it's seductive, nice bunker, underground hotel, it's fine. It can be taken off you.
I was thinking maybe like the equivalent of the bunker that might actually work would be a steel-hulled sailing boat. Because you can move from place to place, but you'd have to have a home port or a harbor that you could kind of be in. But then you can go from there to other places.
what might work as a bunker substitute, and this is where I came to, is a community of, say, 30 or 40 families
Yeah.
full of useful people that could think flexibly and had each other's backs. That could be a bunker, far more effective than a hole in the ground.
For sure. Yeah, a lot of it is the whole community aspect. Like I read a bunch of different books, and like, so say in a suburban setting, if someone was to stockpile food, then the other people in the suburb would be getting hungry, and they're like, hey, that person isn't losing weight, they must have a stockpile of food. And then they go raid it. And so it's not so you need that kind of community of people who are like-minded and, say, getting together like at least once a week to worship the integral humanity in everybody, so that they maintain peaceful relationships.
Yeah, if you're in a group, if you're a have and you're surrounded by have-nots, you know, sleep with one eye open.
Yeah. And that was for the design plan. So the ideal would be, like, say you have like one of these food forests, and then on the edges you can have prickly, like thorny shrubs, like hawthorn and Osage orange, like, and that would be kind of your defense there. And then you would be on the inside, and without satellite, people would have a trouble knowing that there's anyone on the inside with a nice pristine food forest or whatever. So it would be, and that's why one of my recommendation is to build with a 30 to 50 meter offset from the road to avoid roving bandits, because our roads will become kind of the avenue for the urban criminals looking for rural resources when they're they have the mass exodus related to the Eroy decline, which would be around here, 5-7. And then maybe John Peach will be able to give us that information next time on the quality.
Oh, it might take longer than that for him to put that together. He might,
Yeah.
but it's a fairly substantial piece of work.
Right. And so what else we got here? Sci-fi movie, Hadley cell structure, weather patterns. Remember that the conveyor belt? It seems to be slowing down. Like, was it really cold in Finland now?
It is.
I heard.
Oh, not really. Minus 24.
That's
okay.
Well, Canada gets to minus 40.
Yes.
And further north in Finland, it gets to minus 40.
Mm-hmm.
So you got the polar vortex thing happening. You know, it happened a couple of years ago for the first time in a couple of 100 years. Now it happens every now and then. So it's the volatility in what we all expect to see. So I'm sitting here in a t-shirt, right, and through that window is minus 24 degrees.
Wow. Yeah.
Right. So.
Yeah.
Here we've had 3 100-year storms in like a month and a half. We've had 3 sort of flooding events and 50, 75 mile an hour winds in a month and a half. So I don't know what's going on, but whatever it is not normal. And I mean, it's just a little example. The snowmobile industry has lost all of its bridges. We lost a bunch of bridges here in Maine. I mean, how many times do you pulverize bridges before maybe transportation doesn't work as well?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, they were saying this conveyor belt over here is slowing down, and this is what brings the warm water to Europe and makes it cold in Canada. And so it's warming up in Canada, and it's kind of cooling down in Europe.
So I saw back in 2010, there was the Gulf of Mexico oil spill in the event horizon, widely known as a bad day in the oil industry.
Oh, yeah.
Now, so much oil was pumped out, and it's all still there. It's not on the surface anymore, right? But it's about something like a kilometer below the surface, but it's all still there, and you've got a massive chunk of highly viscous material that's more viscous than water. And I saw a fairly credible report that suggested that the global conveyor belt goes through the Gulf of Mexico and out again, and for a short period of time, it actually slowed down and stopped, and it's restarted again. But all that oil is still there. Right, so that industrial accident, that one industrial accident, the conveyor belt was already slowing down. And I haven't been able to find any useful information since then, because you know, censorship and people don't want to know and all that. But that was a thing that I was so worried about. Well, okay, it started up again because it's a global system, but it is now different. Right, and these things, and the planet, the systems will adapt to a new equilibrium. And 10 years, here we are, 14 years later, that's nothing in terms of climate change, climate timeframes. When you've got geological timeframes of, say, 20,000 years, that's considered a relatively fast change.
Well, I mean, if we get into climate change, it's even scarier. And in a way, peak oil is the solution to climate change. I mean, I call it a Gaia's self-cleaning oven cycle, which is kind of mean. But I mean, you know, you think about it in a way, here's this organism, you know, Gaia as an organism decides, okay, this little creature is bugging me too much. Right? Heat up, cook them out, and then move on with, you know, the normal Holocene, 100,000 years of Ice Age, 10,000 years of interglacial. Well, so if we can move back to that, it might take, you know, a couple thousand years to burn us all off, but I think, you know, it's possible, and then it goes back to it's the way that it has been for the last, you know, million years or so. 450,000, yeah. So, you know, I mean, we're kind of pushing it. We're pushing it up. Normal interglacial is 280 parts per million is the normal top of the interglacial. And we've pushed it up to 420 something now. And so that's, you know, a third higher than it usually is. So that's not really a good thing. So if it's a self-regulating system, you know, it's going to fix itself, and it's not going to be pleasant.
Yeah.
Well, you know? I think that if we look at it from that Gaia hypothesis, then these ice ages, they were getting like longer and longer. And so getting all that carbon into the atmosphere is actually good for reducing the risk of another glaciation event.
No, because the glacier is what kept it alive. According to Lovelock, the idea is that the Gaia likes it cold. That's the way he said it. Basically, the world is a nonagenarian, or it's due to be cooked by the sun eventually, right? And so what the glacier does is it keeps it cool, because the albedo, or the white of the glaciers, reflects sun back into the you know, heat back in out of the off the earth, and keeps it cool. And it wants it to keep cool because once it gets, you know, back in the time of the dinosaurs, it could be hot everywhere, pole to pole. The whole planet could be hot, but we can't do that anymore. We can't deal with over, you know, 300 parts per million of CO2. This planet can't live like that. And so what it was doing is it was throwing out these ice ages to keep itself cool and keep life going in the, you know, in the middle of the earth where the ice wasn't. We are, you know, an artifact of that. So if we push it, we could get to a point where all of a sudden it just gets too hot, and it just
it is possible for sure,
and it'll stay like that for 1,000 years or something, and then try to cut it back down. You think 10 million? I don't know about 10 million.
Well, they say if we get into the worst case scenario,
where
we say get to RCP 8.5 or whatever, and then everything turns into Canfield oceans. That would take 10 million years to recover.
Oh yeah, no. Then you got basically a lifeless world. But
Yeah.
I think if if Gaia does react, then Gaia is going to cook us off, and then hopefully go back to, that stable ice age, interglacial. But it's true. Nobody really knows what's going to happen if we do it. If we screw up, and there's, Kevin Hester and I both know what people are talking about there. I mean, you end up with a lifeless world, and it doesn't take very long for it to happen. And it doesn't, nature wants to keep, the whole Gaia idea is that Gaia wants to keep life within this bound. It wants to keep it within this homeostasis. And so I think the idea of Gaia as a kind of a deity, or not a deity really, but a system to keep everybody alive and the whole world alive. I think the idea is that Gaia would try to keep it within bounds, but if we push it too far, then it actually it breaks. But I like the idea of just Gaia just cooking us off and moving on.
Yeah, I like your self-cleaning oven analogy. I don't think we have enough fossil fuels to get to RCP 8.5 just on fossil fuels, but
it's good to know.
Missing is the feedback loops that are not well known yet.
Yeah, the positive feedback loops.
Yeah.
And I mean, you look, there are other places that have gone through this, other planets that have gone through this change where the sun itself gets so hot that it just doesn't allow,
Venus.
Like Venus, it gets too hot.
Mm-hmm.
So other places are, not in that Goldilocks zone where, life is possible, There
But yeah,
places.
I heard if we manage it well, and say for instance John Peach's estimate here that we go into Seneca Cliff, and then we manage to maintain the environment, we could maintain it for another 50 to 100 million years before it gets too hot.
Yes. Longer than that. It's probably half a billion years.
Maybe 500 million. But yeah.
500 million years before the sun cooks us, which is practically forever, really. I mean, who cares?
Yeah.
But what we're doing is we're playing this little dangerous game where we're just pumping it full of crazy fuel, just to get ourselves up to, I don't know. I mean, maybe, the other thing that I thought was, what if this is part of the whole life cycle, right? It pushes us to push little people out there or whatever. All we have to do is go to another human-like planet or life-like planet and just crap on it. And as soon as we crap on it, we've sort of seeded that other place. So maybe what the fossil fuels are is they're sort of a seed mechanism at the end of our life cycle where we just are pushed to do something, and then we go fly off to someplace, crap on some other planet, and out will be little biota and create another, eventually create a whole nother system, So, I mean, that's a possibility too,
Mm-hmm.
It's more like that when technology and at the stage that we're at creates like humans will go extinct, and we don't see any technological civilization anywhere else in the universe, because when they get to this stage, they go extinct.
It's possible, but maybe the idea is that then on their way to going extinct, they send these little silver seeds out, silver spaceships out to other places, and crap on them, as I say, or just scuttle out and die, and then all the little organisms crawl off of us and into start to make a several million year cycle.
So I actually read multiple reports that basically these timelines. So the deep underground military base timeline it goes to that RCP 8.5 scenario or whatever, and then everything turns to Canfield oceans, and then they have to live. They turn into those gray aliens because they can only reproduce through cloning, and that's part of their time travel thing, is going back to try to steer us away from that terrible timeline with the underground bases.
Yes.
And but there is other timeline, which was the Sylvan one. There's and so they actually also went back in time to try to get us to go to their timeline, and so they're doing that at the same time, and they but apparently they some of their they live underground, and they have their own kinds of like domes, and so then they like meditate at people. They were called the Anshar or something like that, and apparently they confused the Nazis because they had gone back in time 18 million years, and they were dividing their groups so that they wouldn't get genetically homogenous, and then the Nazis took this to be a racial superiority thing, and they took it the wrong way. But anyways,
well, I mean, just the reality of the world. Once you realize like what is actually going on, it is a lot like one of these science fiction books. You realize, like, the actual reality that we're living in right now is like a science fiction reality. Mm-hmm. Which is kind of entertaining in a way, but it's also, you just realize like the crap we're in right now, like the crazy, systems that are trying to make it seem like everything's working, etc. It really is entertaining, kind of entertaining to watch it, but it's also like you just realize there's not much as an individual person you really can do.
Yeah,
understanding it is really entertaining.
So yeah, that was kind of the point, I think, is that it's an individual choice. So if if you want to go to that underground military base timeline, well, you just join the military, right? And then or if you want to do the rustic lifestyle, then you go join the Amish, and then or go survive in the bush if you want the indigenous one, or start making a food forest for this one, and then you actually will get to experience that because there's like this infinite branching of timelines, and so just based on your choices. And so the main thing for this one, the best case scenario, was the forgiveness, love, and kindness for all beings, and then openness to communicating with extraterrestrials and things like that. Here, I've got a few other comments here. How about old airplanes as above ground bunkers? Well, they're not very, they're very thin. Ugo Bardi, I think, might have got into the broader mineral declines. I don't know. Do you guys have any news from Ugo Bardi? I haven't heard from him in a while.
I talk to him on the internet sometimes. He kind of has given up, I think, the Seneca Cliff blog, but he does other things.
Mm-hmm. My understanding is that he was kind of upset that he considers himself not a catastrophist, and so when the data showed that we would go into Seneca Cliff, he decided he's not going to talk about it anymore.
Well, he actually is a big believer in solar panels, and I kind of like solar panels too. I think they're wonderful, but I don't know if it's going to create a new future that's going to really work for everybody. The whole thing. It's just too much of a change. I love the things. I think they're great. I think there's a good way to start to have something for individual people, but I can't see them saving everybody. But I think he got a little upset about that. But we had him on this podcast, which was pretty cool, huh?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
cool. All the, and Michael Dowd.
Yeah.
Michaux, John.
Oh, and we might get Stephen Rocco later this month. It's just he's in Hawaii. He does the SRC.
He's great. SNS Rocco report.
Yeah. So the 22nd, I'll try to get a Hawaii time zone.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I got another comment here. You guys could join a collapse community. At least Simon could test his ideas. I don't know, Simon, are you planning on joining a collapse community or anything like that?
So no, when I was 20 years ago, I went through a phase where I was trying to develop that. In fact, there's a YouTube clip of me presenting my ideas to develop a self-sufficient community from 2013.
Mhm.
And that where I outline a blueprint of how to take a small town self-sufficient, 40 to 50 families, and it's on YouTube.
There
I
it
think,
is.
yeah. So there it is. That's
Mhm.
actually a blueprint of things to actually sort of things and consider and to build. It's supposed to be the start of the conversation. Anyway, I joined up with a collapse group, and there gets a certain point when you can't really proceed past until something actually happens. You can't actually do anything, and if you live your life with the idea that it's all going to go to shit tomorrow, the shit's going to hit the fan tomorrow, and there comes a point when you get emotionally exhausted after that, and so where I'm at the moment is once I've actually become resilient, mental resilient and flexible within myself, that I feel I can respond to what I'm looking at and I can adapt and change. Any plans that you might make, your life has a way of destroying, right? And so, but if you've got the ability to be flexible and move, I also don't have the resources. If I had the resources, it might be different. Like if I was handed $1 gazillion, I might, buy a block of land and build a structure, or maybe several communities that you could move between. And so, but for me, in my current place where I don't really have much in the way of resources, and things have to sort of move forward, and I could feel myself becoming institutionalized by life in general. And so what I've done is I've actually sort of stepped around and past that and beyond that. So that being said, my plans for the future are actually similar to what Dune's doing at the moment, but with several billion US dollars behind it. Right. So
Right. With the Venus Project.
Yeah. But and that will think in terms of defenses and camouflage and tactics and strategy and all that. I just don't say it out loud. And so, yeah. And so it's not that I don't, I refute, it's not that I don't agree with the idea of collapse. I think we will see everything fragment, but what I do think is it's going to happen unevenly across the planet. Some areas are really going to go to shit, and some areas will find it merely difficult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that it might actually be the third world that has an easier time, just because they have not as far to fall. Like in South America, I was hearing a lot of them already use ethanol and sugarcane fuel and things like
All
that.
that works. That works. The problem is you can't use it for lots of people. It comes to a point when the logistical bottlenecks step in and you can't scale up.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is all is beautiful and all that.
And that's where the population goes down till carrying capacity, like the limits to growth was saying.
Well, that depends. If we're all going to act like lemmings, then that's exactly what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
If we're all going to have like dumbass decisions and decision making and self-serving, petty and petulant ways of solving problems, yep, that's what we get.
Well, the population goes down because of increased death rate, not because of decreased birth rate.
So that's actually what is it? The take the labels off, safety labels off things, and let nature sort itself out.
Right.
I think it's just a combination of a lot that will bring it down. I think a lot of places are going to become pretty much unlivable. and all of a sudden people and there's going to be food coming in. It's like the reason that Rome went from a city of over 1 million down to 40,000. It took a while, but it was like, ours is going to be a lot quicker. I think all of a sudden a lot of people are just going to vote with their feet, try to move out, go places, do things. And the population is just going to it is also going to get a lot more dangerous a lot of places. I was thinking, the whole idea of international travel, the way everybody sort of flips around to different little places and things, it becomes less and less viable. So I think a lot of things become a lot more dangerous and a lot more tricky, and the whole world becomes a lot more like living in a third world country, which I've done. I mean, it was a much more dangerous place. The whole living in Central America in the 80s, I just sort of felt like it was a much more dangerous place to be, So I think that's what happens. And then things slowly sort of tick down and there are less people. Mega cities are going to they're either going to have to figure out how to get all the food and things to come into them, or they're going to drop really quickly.
Yeah. Oh, well, what's happening now is the rural crime on the rise because of urban people.
Well, I mean, it's just, it's not just, I was thinking about it, having, we had a kind of a isolated maple syrup operation, and you couldn't, we put up cameras and bulletproof things and stuff, but you can't completely guard against every single thing. And there's also people coming and taking things, and, people get hungry, things change, and so it's just the general deterioration of a lot of our all the things that have kept us all alive and moving around and eating and doing everything. I think it just sort of slowly, like it shows in that in your graph, it just sort of slowly starts to tick down, and they show food going down,
population, industrial output
down. It all kind of like peaks around nowish, and then it all kind of comes down a bit. And by the end of the century, you're in a different world where it just doesn't work the same way it used to. So, and maybe it's not a bad thing because, I mean, there's a lot of us, but I kind of like to see my nieces and nephews have an okay life.
Oh, well, the Mass Dreams of the Future was saying the population would be closer to like 500 million or under 1 billion.
Oh, yeah.
By 2100. 94% population decline from 1980.
That's what they're saying, but I don't know if it could go down quite that much, but I think it could easily a quarter, a tenth,
Well, half of our food is from fossil fuels, right?
Oh yeah. No, I mean, there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee in life anyway, but you just sort of like feel like less and less guarantee as the 100 years goes on. You just feel like, we're not 100 anymore. 76 years. I was thinking the other day, I saw a little tiny baby, and I thought that kid is going to be 76 years old at the end of the millennium. Think what it's going to be like. If that kid lives a normal life, what's it going to be like? It's looking into the future. That kid's in the future.
Well, it's over 2 hours now. So do you guys have any closing remarks? And then we'll round up.
Not from me. Beyond, I need to get the Hawaii report done and finished. I'm talking to the Club of Rome guys to merge my work with Harold Svedrup, and that's going to be, if it all works out, maybe a Club of Rome report. Let's see.
Nice.
That's ages away though.
Oh,
Apart from that, nothing from me.
All right.
Hey, thank you guys.
Yeah, it's great seeing everybody. And I'll get working on this other thing.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Sounds great. And then so we'll probably have another European time zone one next month. And otherwise, we're going to try to do a Hawaii, New Zealand, Australia on the 22nd. All right.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you,
Okay,
guys.
so leave you in the love and in the light of the one infinite creator. Go forth, therefore, rejoicing in the power and the peace of the one creator. All right. Okay, I ended the stream.